Good morning, everybody. Superly excited with the energy of the youth here, right? To be honest, I'm back to college after a long time, almost 20 years. Uh, I when I did my MBA in Indore as well. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually go for the campus there. Okay, but coming back to campus makes me feel young again. So thanks for inviting me here. Okay, and as I said, the energy of the youth, right? The future CXOs of India, right? I'm sure you guys all are aspiring to be, right? Okay, so I want to make it a little bit more interactive session. Okay, I don't want to bore you with PPTs here. Okay, because I'm sure in the present world, all that I'm going to talk about, you have almost read here, right? But I would like to keep it more interactive. Please feel free to ask any questions that you want, any sort of questions that you feel like you should ask. You can ask me. Okay. Let me start with a small background of mine. I don't want to spend too much of time. Let me first introduce me as a person. Okay, I don't want to be entitled with my position or something. I am a father of a 18-year-old daughter and a wife to a doctor. Okay, so that's my introduction of myself. Okay, then let's talk about what I'm doing. So I'm today fortunate to work with the team of T Connectivity to grow our business. So I'm responsible as a vice president and general manager for the transportation solutions segment of TE Connectivity. I've been with TE for last 2 decades, I would say. Okay, I know these days people will be surprised that I'm staying with one organization for last 20 years. Let me just try to talk a little through my journey a little bit here. So I joined TE after my MBA as a customer service engineer. Okay, and I want to tell this story because it's a little bit of, I feel it's an aspiration for all of us to do what it is. Okay, so let me try to talk you through my journey a little bit, and I'm going to talk through this journey more to give you what should be the mantra for success, as I feel it helped me a little bit. Okay, um, when I joined as a customer service engineer, I always had an aspiration that I should take sales. Okay, unfortunately, when I joined TE, it was a time period when the industry was through a recession. There were no jobs available. Okay, but when I got this job in customer service, it was in roughly around 1999. That was a time I I started my job in customer service. Okay, but when I had an opportunity to interact with one of the senior leaders in TE that time, and I asked him that I've done my MBA in marketing and finance, and I don't think I belong here. One message that he gave me, which I want to pass it on to you guys here, is okay, if you have an aspiration, get curious on the products, get curious about what's happening in the market, how our business model is, and I can promise you that you'll get this role. Okay, and that was a very interesting transition for me. I remember those days. I brought in all the products that TE had and broke them into pieces because I was an engineer at heart. I wanted to see what's inside in the product. So the important part was I was very curious about these products. I also brought in competition products that time and broke them all, and they were all lying on my table. In 6 months of my joining, the same gentleman with whom I've spoken with was passing through from near my table, and he saw all those broken pieces there. He was superly excited to see what is this guy trying to do. Okay, why is he breaking all the nice products here, right? So, and then he called me to his cabin and he asked me what is that you have done. I've said I've broken our products to try and understand what these products actually tell us. Okay, and then I've also broken the competition products to understand what the competition product tells us and what is our USP on the products, because if we have to go to the market, we'll have to have a certain USP for us. And I wanted to understand what's our USP with respect to competition, and so I've broken them. He was superly excited and he said, okay, I give you a half an hour session, okay, with the leadership team. If you crack that session, you move into sales. Okay, and then, okay, obviously he gave me a week's time. I prepared whole week. Okay, in fact, I hardly slept for that week. Okay, and fortunately for me, I got that opportunity, and I got an opportunity to move from customer service to sales that time. Okay, the the motto of telling this story to you guys is, okay, if you are curious, if you are serious about where you want to go, okay, and if you are willing to go that extra mile to learn about things, I'm sure there will be opportunities created for you. Okay, and then let me tell the further story as well. I started managing, say, there were Tata Motors as an account manager there. In a few years, obviously, like all others, I also started getting bored there. Okay, and I was thinking I should make a change, as like all everybody, right? Why does a person like to stay 20 years in an organization? Okay, so at that time I realized what's my next ambition. Okay, those days there was an international sales manager who was continuously traveling abroad and stuff, and I thought, hey, looks like he has a nice job. He travels every alternate week to Europe, US, Asia, so I should aspire for it. I tried to I kind of set up a meeting with him and understood from him what would it take for me to understand to learn this job. He said, you need to understand the international laws and stuff, duties and stuff, and obviously you need to have a better communication. I started working on it. A few years later, okay, I would not say few years, few months later, I went back again to him and explained to him that this is what I have done. Okay, so the good part is I got that role as well. So cutting the long story short, okay, it's the curiosity, to grow, it's the curiosity to learn new things which helped me grow in this organization. Okay, and that's the message that I want to pass on here in this short story that I wanted to put in here. The balance, let me talk a little bit about my family. Okay, as I said, I have a cute little daughter in her teens, obviously, so sometimes it's a trouble managing her, but yeah, but that's the fun part as well. And in the morning I was telling all the professors here, my wife is a physiotherapist and a nutritionist. Okay, so she keeps control on what I eat, what I do all the day. Okay, so that's a little bit about my family. I want to also highlight one more aspect of what I put here. Over here I've put a word called grit. Anybody wants to take a shot on what does this mean? I don't know if the voice will reach from there. Determination, absolutely. So there are a lot of people who have a lot of talent, right? But the differentiation is not just talent, it's also the grit, the determination that makes you successful in an industry, right? So from that perspective, I feel, and when people ask me what's my strength as a person, and I say the grit. Okay, so which means that it is not that I've never failed. Which means that it's not that we have never been into problems. I have also sat with my boss having tough discussions at the year end where I have not met my numbers. Okay, I've spent most of the time either as a P&L leader or a sales leader, so I've always been very close to numbers. But then there was a grit which I believed that we will turn things for us, and that's why I believe that that's a very important strength that I have. There's a nice book called Grit itself, right? You should read this book. It talks about what's the difference between just having talent and having talent along with grit, or just having grit. People who have grit may probably do a particular activity slightly later than the talented guy, but the consistency is what is more important, okay, than just doing it once. And for us all, okay, in a young age, it's important that we understand this importance of grit, and that's what I say that this is my strength in terms of what helped me to do better in the industry. And these lines talk about it. So if you see here, what does these lines tell you? What does this graph tell you here? So the levels are up, down. The other one is a consistent effort. Intensity is up and down, whereas on the other side it's consistent, right? So when you are consistent, okay, there is obviously a better chance for you to win. Okay, let's look at this example, and I think this example everybody is very familiar with, right? So Vinod Kamli, probably if you talk to the coach of Vinod Kamli and Sachin Tendulkar, in terms of talent, they will rate Vinod Kamli even higher than Sachin Tendulkar, right? But who actually created history was Sachin Tendulkar. Why? Because he was more determined. He had more discipline. Okay? And that's also one of the important aspects that we have to learn. It's not just talent that is going to help us. It's also, obviously, talent is required. Talent is required. Knowledge can be acquired through consistent efforts as well. Don't forget this. Okay? That's what is also extremely important here. Discipline is very, very important. Showing up is very, very important. There are a lot of times when things are so bad that you don't want to show up. But when you show up, even in those difficult times, that's where solutions start coming in. Okay? So from that perspective, I would put grit, okay, showing up, discipline above just knowledge, just talent. Okay? So it's very, very important for us to understand that success is a consistent effort. Okay? Consistent effort. The word consistent is very, 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 very important. Okay? With a lot of discipline and showing up in difficult times as well. Right? So this is an extremely important aspect of getting into an industry in from my perspective. I strongly believe that people who were consistent, okay, people who were willing to show up even in difficult times, grew better in industries than people who just had talent. Okay, and I think there are a lot of examples, and I specifically took this example because I know these days this is a great example which is running around, right? Let's take a how do you say a small example maybe, or a theory, right? Assume that there's an extremely talented guy, okay? He has to study something. Because of his talent, he can do it in half an hour. Probably a person who is more determined will do it in 2 hours. But when they go on the stage, the guy who has spent 2 hours will be also equivalent to the guy who is super talented, right? The important point is the guy who has done half an hour, if he doesn't do it consistently in the future, the guy who is doing it after 2 hours will take over. The reason I am emphasizing this is talent is important, but consistency, grit is even more important to succeed in the corporate world. Okay? I will refer to one of these statements which one of my earlier mentors made to me. Okay, in my earlier days, he had when I was trying to, like all aspirants, I was also very aspiring. I always, when I came to Pune from my hometown, from a small town, right? The first thing I had in my mind was I want to be a CEO of a company. Okay, this was what I was determined with. Okay, and I always thought about it. I went to that time CEO of TE and asked him that what should I do to take your position in few years. He made a very interesting sentence that time, and it still stuck with me. It is still stuck with me, and I thought that it also helped me a lot. And I am assuming that everybody follows Hindi, but I'll also convert it into English as well. जहाँ पे सरस्वती है वहाँ पे लक्ष्मी जाती है, right? So that was the sentence that he made, okay? So what he meant, wherever knowledge is, where fame, power and money goes, right? That is what he actually meant, okay? So what he said is you have to acquire knowledge over a period of time, okay? You have to make sure that you remain curious all your life, keep learning, keep the enthusiasm, don't remain within the how do you say borders of your own function. If you want to take a CEO role of the future or a CFO role or a CDO role, you need to know beyond boundaries. You have to need to know across your functions, across various functions. And that was the message that he gave me those days. That stuck with me. The second message that he gave me is an interesting message, and this was a little bit later, I would say. Okay, it was not at the same time. Actually, when I was made the country sales head for tea that time, I was very young. I was probably 33, 34 that time. Okay, and all the people who were sitting along with me on the desk that time were slightly elder to me. To be very open with you all, I was nervous. In the meetings, I was very nervous to even speak up. Okay, I was very worried. Okay, and that time the leader there had put how to say, he wanted to take the feedback of everybody, and he wanted to share that feedback with everybody. And some of the feedbacks that came up was that, okay, since I'm closer to the that time leader there, I was made the country head. Okay, and I'm just explaining this to give you all the message that came behind it. That made me even more nervous. So in the meetings, I was superbly nervous during those meetings. My CEO, who was a little further away from us, he was observing me, and he realized that I'm not performing that well, and I had a lot of issues. People were saying, hey, this guy is not contributing in the meetings and stuff, right? He decided to call me for a dinner. He invited me for a dinner, and on the dinner, he made a very interesting sentence. He first asked me, why are you so much nervous these days? What is that you're not coming up with the ideas that you are known for? And I explained to him that I'm so nervous these days that people are saying that I've been a friend of this guy, so I've been made the country head here, and I feel very worried to sit around with the people who are almost 40 and I'm just 34, 35. Okay. He made a very interesting sentence, and I also mentioned to him that I am following a leader who has been very flamboyant, who's done great. He moved from India to be the global president of TE, okay, sitting in the US. So he was a very flamboyant leader that time, okay. So I am following him, and the expectations are too high, and the burden of expectations is killing me. Okay? That was the message that I gave to my CEO. He made a very interesting sentence, okay, and this is very important for us to understand when we enter into the corporate world. He said, we don't want to duplicate the same leader again. We have made you the leader because you have some unique capabilities within you. We don't want the same leader to be replicated here. We don't want a Xerox copy of your earlier leader. We want the uniqueness that you have, and you surely have, for you to bring on the table, right? And that's what is important for us. And if you start bringing your uniqueness without thinking about what others are thinking about, whether I'm doing the same things like my earlier leader was doing, you will surely excel, and you will contribute much bigger to the organization than even the earlier leader. So this was the message that he gave me. So in short, the story is that everybody has a uniqueness in him. Understand your strengths. Bring them to the table. You don't have to be worried about what the strengths of others have. Obviously, you have to understand your gaps and learn them and bring them up as well. But don't forget that you are here because you are unique. You have your own competencies which can help you succeed in the organization. Okay, so understand what are your strengths. Work on those strengths. Find where are the gaps as well. Obviously, you have to also learn those gaps. Okay, but it's also important to know that it's your strengths you also have certain strengths. which will help you to grow, right? So that's the important message that I got during my days there. You know, when you talk to people about corporate world, I think you cannot leave Steve Jobs out, right? Because he's a, I think he was a guy who went through all the ups and downs of life, right? He was a guy who created this company, but he was sucked out of his company itself, right? So he's been a great example, and I'm sure you guys, most of you guys must have read about them. But I would like to use these 11 principles a little bit, okay? The first thing, do what you love, right? It's important for us to do what we love or love what we do, okay? It's very, very important for us. The passion, the passion will come only when you love what you do or you do what you love, right? There's a lot of discussions these days happening about work-life balance. The more important discussion that we, the emerging youth should have, is the work-soul integration. What does this mean? What does work-soul integration mean? Is put your heart inside into what you are doing. And that can happen only if you love what you do. This is one of the important steps for anybody to succeed in life, right? There are a lot of people who can succeed only based on their willingness to put their heart in. That's a very important aspect which our Steve Jobs has also mentioned. The second one he says is stay hungry, stay foolish. And I again go back to my example here, all right? The breaking of the products that day was my curiosity to learn what's behind these products. That helped me to move my career to the path that I wanted to take, right? Not the path that was laid for me, the path that I wanted to take. It was the curiosity, and the curiosity was not only just for my products but also for the competition products. And I also wanted to understand what should I place across to my customer as a value so that my customer will buy products from me. And this was something which I was able to explain to them because of the curiosity that I had, right? So that's an important message that helps. Follow your intuition, okay? A lot of the times, okay, there are a lot of decisions that you'll have to make with limited data, and especially in leadership roles, right? You always do not have 100% data with you, but when you follow your intuition, it helps, right? So these are a few things that he's mentioned. The next one is don't settle. And that's the reason I started with my journey a little bit. If you have seen my journey, every 3 years I've done something different. I went to Europe to lead a small company within the company. When I went to Europe, I had no exposure how to manage a workforce in Europe, okay? I was a P&L leader for a new emerging product line which TE had created. Okay, and I went there as an expat for 3 years. It was a huge learning for me. It was a huge learning for me. As I said, my always aspiration was sales. I have done roles in quality. I started with customer quality and I did quality. There were huge learnings for me in quality as well. I did a role in supply chain. I did a role in procurement. Okay, the reason was I always wanted to do more. Okay, today I feel that has given me is I have got how do you say exposure across all functions. Learn from failures. Okay, this I don't have to explain to you guys. Focus on quality, right? Think differently. The next one I would like to go deep little is don't be afraid to think big. Okay, I'll tell you, there are a lot of times when I put the number, so when we put a long-term strategy, we put a long-term 5-year plan. When we put the numbers, we ourselves were scared to put those numbers, right? But we said that we should do it. We said that we should do it. Today, I can tell you, 90% of the time we hit our numbers. The reason for that is we always thought big. And when we put the numbers, we were always thinking, how do we work towards that bigger number? I can tell you the first time when I put my numbers, the guy said, I remember the strategy guy is telling me, hey, are you guys crazy? Do you think you will grow 3.5 times that what you are today? But we always had a belief. We always had a story behind it. Okay? So think big is very, very important. Stay true to your vision. Work with talented people. It's also important with whom you work. Okay? Embrace simplicity. This is also one of the important aspect of personal growth. Normally people think complexity gives growth. It's a false idea. Simplicity drives innovation. Okay, so be as simple as possible, be as concise as possible. The next thing that I would like to mention here is the 7 habits of effective people, right? Most of you guys must have read Stephen Covey, right? Have you guys? Right? So I don't want to run through all the 7 habits. I'm more interested on the 8th habit of Stephen Covey, but I would just like to highlight a little bit on few of this. Okay, obviously the first one is be proactive. We spoke about it a little bit. Okay, think win-win, right? Is something which I would like to emphasize as, okay, any deal that you have, okay, any discussions that you have to always think how can both teams win-win. Right? Normally when we go to a negotiation with the customer, okay, our aim is always thinking how I can have a better price for us. If you are able to think how can I solve my customer's problem and get a better value for my product, you do better with the customers. You create a relationship with the customer, right? So that's also very important that you use the think win-win aspect of Stephen Covey's 7 habits. These are very good habits. Okay, if you guys have not read about Stephen Covey's 7 habits, please read them. Okay. The second thing I would like to talk about from the 7 habits of Stephen Covey is first things first, right? Which means that prioritize. We are distracted so much today, right? There are so much TikTok reels which are coming in. There are so much Facebook, drama that is happening around with us, right? But we have to prioritize. If your goal is to excel in the corporate world, you need to make sure that you spend at least 1 hour on your self-development. Okay, at least 1 hour on your self-development. Okay, if you guys have read this book from Robin Sharma, the 5 a.m. Club, okay, start early to create that 1 or 2 hours for yourself, even if you have a busy world. Okay, so please make sure that you prioritize things. I will not go to the other habits. Okay, I obviously sharpen the saw. You have to increase your knowledge and stuff. But I'm also interested in the 8th habit. The 8th habit talks about. Anybody has any idea what does the 8th habit talk about? Nobody wants to take a guess. In short, it talks about enlarging the circle of influence and control. Enlarging the circle of influence and control. This is a very important aspect in the corporate world. And how can you enlarge the circle of influence and control? Is a huge important aspect is networking. Networking. We Indians are very bad at this. Okay. It's important to network. It's important to network, to go and be open to sit across the tables of a lot of senior leaders asking for appointments and discussing them various aspects. It's very important to enlarge your circle of influence. Make sure that you have a huge connect with everybody and almost anybody in the organization. Right? Enlarging the circle of control. Enlarging the circle of control is the circle of control. Because you have enlarged your circle of influence, you can control much bigger things. Because you will come to know a lot of things as well. Okay? So from that perspective, enlarging the circle of influence and control is also equally important. How am I doing on time? It's good? Okay. So important for us is enlarging our circle of control and in circle of influence. But then when you go and meet these leaders, you need to have your own brand. It's very important for us to create our brand, right? The brand can be anything, right? Now, I'm not talking about Louis Vuitton or Van Heusen here. Our personal brand identity. What is your personal brand identity? Okay, my say to do ratio is 100%. Can be your brand as well. If I tell something to him and he comes back and says, promises me that he will deliver 100%. My say to do ratio is 100%. Could be a brand identity. So, which means that if I take a task, I commit my task, I do it 100%. Your brand can be, I am a technocrat, which means that any technical thing, if I put forward in front of me, I can read through and understand the technology behind it. Right? It is up to you to decide how would you like to be referred to as from the brand perspective. But it's very important for you guys to create your own brand if you have to succeed in this in the corporate world. Okay? It's the brand helps you to grow, and a combination of a brand with the enlarged circle of influence is the success mantra in the corporate world, right? So it's very, very important for us to have a brand created for ourselves. The brand could be even simple. There are various ways to create brand, right? You have to read a lot. You have to, as I said, deliver whenever required. Okay, whatever. You can define how you want to be known as. Okay, simplicity can also be a brand, right? Open to people can also be a brand. Okay, but you have to understand, and I would put a little bit of extra over here, is how you also have to understand what brand will sell in the corporate area where you want to grow. Okay, you need to understand that as well. Now you would ask me, how do I understand this, right? How do I understand this? And that's where you talk to those people who have been successful in those areas. Understand from them, right? We as Indians are a little shy to do this. We are very shy to ask people. We are very shy to ask people. We are very shy to meet people on a professional level, right? That's something which we'll have to break out on. Yeah, oh, sorry. Okay, I spoke about it, right? Importance of networking. There are various benefits of networking. Okay, but important is when you create networking, right? Why would the other person give you time? And if you remember the radio a serial which used to come in, it says, "What's in it for me?" So, what is the value that you will create for the other person is also important when you have this idea of networking with you. Let's even take simple relationships, right? The relationships stay longer when there is a mutual benefit for each other. Now, people would say, okay, you cannot put mutual benefits in relationship, but it's the reality of life. It's the reality of life. So, from that perspective, when you do networking in the corporate world, it's also important to understand that when you do networking, what is the value that you will bring to the other person on the other side of the table as well. Otherwise, why would he spend time with you? You need to understand his time is also important for him. He also has only 24 hours in a day. So if you are not adding value and just going to go and have simple chit chats and come back and say, this is my networking theory, it will not work. It's important for you to understand what value I would bring for the person sitting on the other side of the table as well. Right? Then the importance of being short and sweet. Right? And I would like to again point out, especially when we talk about India, we like to elaborate a lot of things. We are not concise. Okay, these days, okay, especially these days, if you want to grow on the leadership ladder, You need to be able to create elevator speech. Elevator speech is that you meet your CEO in the elevator when you are going along the lunchtime, right? You should be able to tell him what you are doing and how you are adding value to the organization in those 2 or 3 minutes that you have, right? That's called an elevator speech. It's extremely important to be able to time your story based on the time that you have, right? Otherwise, what would happen is like, okay, by the time you start your story, the elevator has reached and you don't get the time with your CEO or whoever is traveling with you, all right? So it's important to be very concise, very precise, okay, very clear about what we want to tell the other person. If we keep telling long stories without any, how to say, takeaways from that stories, the networking idea that we have created, the circle of influence that we are talking about, will not fall in place, right? So that's the reason it's very, very important to understand the importance of being short and sweet, okay, and concise. Elevator speech are these days a very important aspect of growth, especially on the leadership channels, right? There are a lot of times you meet your global CEOs just for 5-10 minutes. In that you have to sell, okay, you have to get how to say investments approved, okay. So it's very, very important, and somehow I strongly believe that we as Indians have a long way to learn about being very precise and concise, talking to the point and getting things delivered for us. And I would suggest that the youth should start moving in this direction even more, okay, to help themselves as well as help India drive, how to say, investments back down here into India. We talked about learning from failures, right? And as I said as well, it's not that we did not fail. We failed several times. Okay, we had to give away a lot of businesses that we won as well. But then we learned from there. Okay, we stood up again. We fought back again in the market, and then we still won. Same is so. Failure is only, you fail only when you decide not to get up again and fight, right? Especially when you take leadership roles. And I keep telling this to all my guys, okay? Most of the time, what comes on your table is something which has not worked well for the team. Okay? If you get demotivated by those, I can tell you, you will not be a leader, right? For the leader to be able to embrace those situations and still be positive and try to drive solutions around that is very, very critical, right? So that from that perspective, it's very, very important for us to understand that failures are part of the journey. You may take a particular function and suddenly after a year or two realize that this was the function that where I don't feel I enjoy doing it. That's okay, but you learned a lot about that function. But then you learn from that and then move into the function that you want to be as well, right? So it's very important for us to understand this aspect as well. So as I said at the beginning, one of my strength has been grit. Okay, doesn't mean that I have not failed. It doesn't mean that I didn't have my own challenges here. I had several challenges. I have sat into meetings where there were a lot of discussions about closing plants and stuff. Okay, but we still were able to manage those difficult times, especially during COVID times, right? I can tell you, even during COVID time, we were able to sit inside in the plant. Means we created our living inside in the plant. We put our beds inside in the plant and we worked there to ensure that our plants will still survive. Our plants here, there are some of our plants here are supplying from here to Europe. Unfortunately, if you know, the COVID timings in Europe and India were different. Okay, when COVID was there in Europe, India was still doing good. But when COVID came to India, Europe was working full fledged. So I had to ship parts from my plant when Europe was working there. There was a lot of pressure to give away the technology and send it back to Europe. But we said, no, we will stay inside in the plants and do it. But we did it. So that's the grit that we had. And today I feel proud that we have 4,000 people working in our plant, in that plant. Right? It's very important for us to understand that grit is very, very important. Okay? There will be a lot of adversities. Right? In those adversities, how do we control? Okay? How do we have ownership towards it? How do we own the problem? Okay? How do we increase our reach? Okay? And how do we create endurance? Okay? That's the core. Okay?